Can you hear that? It's really, this, just, there's me and the bugs out here in Gardner, New York. And I'm loving it. I'm really loving it. I'm feeling that I have a new perspective. You know, I see things differently than I usually live in the city. And so being out here in the country, I just feel different. I enjoyed watching the moon rise over the trees last night. Sunset coming up this morning, nice cool breeze. And I just feel different, you know. And so I want to introduce you to somebody who made me feel different also about the Earth. And her name is Nicole Stott. She's an astronaut. And I interviewed her at the St. Pete College where she went to school and is a board member now. Amazing woman, has such a great perspective and a great message. And so here on Do You Have a Light, I'm looking for people that can amplify that message of, you know, the way the world should be in my mind. You know, a little bit more love, a little bit more connection, a little bit more understanding, empathy, you know, and still getting a lot of cool stuff done. Matter of fact, getting stuff done even better by working together. So Nicole has that magic. And I had the honor of meeting her, and she gave me the privilege of spending time with her. And so now I get to share it with you. Here's Nicole Stott. So in one of your videos, this little girl, I think you were in Kansas City, and you had given an hour presentation at one of the, I think it was a library or something. And a little girl stood up and she said, um, can you tell me what you dreamed about when you were a kid? And I thought that was such a great question. So I wanted to start out with, well, I just, when you were a kid, what were you, what was it? I think I'd like people to get to know you a little bit. What's that? You have a great story, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think, as a kid, what I really appreciate now is, um, like the inspiration that my parents shared with me without even, I think, realizing that they were doing that. They just made a point of sharing what they loved with me and my sisters. And that, I think, helped influence, the way I thought about my own, what was I interested and curious about, and also discovering the stuff I wasn't so interested in too, which I think is equally as important. But one of the key things was my dad built and flew small airplanes. I grew up in Clearwater, just up the road from here. And so we hung out, like my entire childhood, hanging out at the local Clearwater Air Park and with flying people, people building airplanes, people flying airplanes. And, on the one hand, I'm really super grateful for the flying part of it, getting that experience.
Yeah.
I'm also grateful to my mom for taking us there, right? We could have just stayed at home while my dad was out working at the airport or playing at the airport, and yet we didn't. We were there together, and it really, the whole flying thing, whether that was wanting to know how to fly myself or wanting to know how things fly, really got into me, and I think it inspired everything that I pursued from that point on, whether it was what I studied at school or the work I wanted to do. And underlying all that, though, I think was um, I don't know, the sense of it, really, the feel of it, the experience of something so totally different than what would be going on in my normal life, which was to be able to lift up off the planet. And I wasn't even really thinking about it that way then. It was just like, oh gosh, I'm in an airplane and I'm flying over my neighborhood and I'm seeing the little cars and the people and houses and realizing, even at a really young age, how close we all really are to each other. Largo as the rival to Clearwater High, not that far away from each other, in the grand scheme of things. And I think that really, stayed with me throughout, was this idea of like, wow, we're really not that far from each other, no matter where we are.
Yeah. And then you got interested, well, I thought was the interesting part of your story was that you actually lost your dad, and I think you're partly inspired by your father's work, right? And his, yeah. And you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that sounds like you would think that if your father was your inspiration for flying, and then this tragic thing happened, that you would go the other way. But you embraced it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think maybe it was the age that I was at. If I was a lot younger, it might have been different. Maybe if I was a lot older, it would be different. But it was like the week before my 16th birthday. And so I already knew, I was already excited about flying. I already wanted to fly myself. I was already looking at, what do I do to earn my own private pilot's I mean, those kinds of things were interesting to me already, and my dad loved it. I mean, he loved flying. I mean, you knew it in everything from inside of our house to outside to the airport, and you knew the man loved flying. And so I was at this stage of figuring out, I say that's this way, figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And beyond just wanting to learn how to fly, I wanted to know how things fly. And that accident that he had was, I think, pretty pivotal in that. I started thinking about, oh, if I continue to pursue this, maybe I can understand what happened and that kind of thing. And so it became a little bit, the substance of it kind of went that way. It never dampened the feelings I had for losing my father, but it was less about it happening in an airplane accident than it was just about losing him. And the airplane side of it became interesting in a different way
Okay.
because of that too.
Yeah. So you didn't really equate the loss of him with the airplane, more of just the loss of your dad.
Yeah.
And then you continued on. To me, it feels like a courageous. I just, I can't help but think about you and then think about courage. Like those two things go together because getting in an airplane as a young woman, doing that is amazing. But then you went on to do, can you talk a little bit about how you got to the space shuttle?
Yeah.
That's
Well, the
pretty
courage
amazing.
thing, I throw that on my mom. I mean, talk about, you think about it, your husband, what was she was like 39 years old or something, and her husband dies in this small airplane crash, and now her daughter wants to go off and not just fly small airplanes, but ultimately is wanting to go, years later, thinking about flying in space. And she never discouraged me, ever. I mean, that's courage, if you think about it. Yeah, but it just they are, and they can push you one way or another without. And I try to think about that with my own son. I don't want to like be subtly discouraging him in something that he's really excited in, just because I might have some fear of it. But very grateful for my mom for not discouraging me. But I just let that love of flying and wanting to know how things fly just kind of carried forward into when I was getting ready to graduate from high school. Holy moly, I didn't even know. I mean, I'm sitting in the we're on St. Pete College campus, and this place was pivotal for me.
You were here, right?
I was at several of the different campuses, but I I didn't even know if I'd go to college after high school. And people just started telling me, well, if you want to know how airplanes fly and you want to fly yourself, you go study this thing called aeronautical engineering, which I just kind of blindly pursued because of that. Um, but it was really the curiosity of it, I think, the flying thing that just kind of stayed in it all. And long story short, I studied aeronautical engineering, got a job at Kennedy Space Center in the post Challenger timeframe where they were getting back to flight on the space shuttle. And with this wonderful group of people that were brought in. And, you mentioned something about, I think it's the guy on the towel, actually, this guy, this one that probably has a lot of really great, like you said, has a lot of really great things to say, right? But it's such a downer when it's all just whiny,
Yeah.
right? But one of the things I learned as an engineer at Kennedy and with NASA in general was, man, that's not the way to get things done. The way to get things done is to be looking at, here's how we can, not why we can't, believing there's solutions to problems and, finding your way to communicate that. And that was such a great place to grow up, I think, as an engineer. And
It would seem to me to be one of the best places in the world to grow up because of that whole can do, and also just the work that they're doing is amazing, right? It's just incredible.
yeah, every day it was. And it's not like, I mean, I remember working there and, it's not like, I guess it's like every other job. There's frustrations, right? But holy moly, I could go down into this hangar where the orbiter was, and I'm looking up at this thing that just flew in space and that we're getting ready to fly in space again. And the people who are going to fly in it were going to be coming to visit to check out their spacecraft. I mean, it was really awesome. But to get to the point of flying on one myself, I mean, I think it was a long path for me because I didn't think about astronaut as like a reality thing. It always seemed like that's something other special people get to do. Yeah, yeah. Why would they pick me for, all those kinds of things that we can use to talk ourselves out of it. I don't know. My awesomeness, I suppose. I don't know. But they did. And and again, I'm grateful to, it's like other people lifting you up along the way, right? It took a lot for me to pick up the pen and fill out the application.
That is such a key. I love that. I saw that so many times in your work. Pick up the pen and fill out the application.
I mean, using the astronaut application is a way to speak to it, but I think it applies in so many other ways, all kinds of things. And I think about it in my life. I'm like, yeah, that was the pick up the pen point, along the way. But for the astronaut application, no one ever told me I couldn't do it, right? If you look at my resume of school and work, I was doing the kinds of things that would qualify for it. Didn't have any major medical things going on. But it was really kind of this gut thing saying, oh, like telling myself no before anybody else would. And so grateful for the mentors, for the same people that taught me about quit the whining and figure out, how you do it. Stop talking about why you can't. Those same people encouraged me to pick up the pen.
Yeah, but you picked up the
Through my experience with NASA, seeing all these people were getting ready, vehicles ready for them to fly on. And I started to discover, first of all, that, most of what they were doing was a lot like what I was already doing as a NASA engineer, right? Sadly, to astronauts, 99.9% of your time is here on Earth. It's not in space. And so that was encouraging to me. But then I was paying more attention to what are they doing while they're in space. And I'm an adventure-y kind of person. I like flying. I like scuba dive. I mean, I like these kinds of things. They're all, with kind of risk management going along.
It's managed risk.
Yeah. But it became clear to me that everything that we were doing in space was ultimately about improving life on Earth. And that was the thing that encouraged me the most to go, okay, I'm going to go talk to Jay and Tip and these other guys about should I? Because that really stood out to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, launching on a space shuttle, awesome. Floating around in space, highly recommended. All of those things that we tend to think about, what astronauts are doing, but the work that we were doing there as this international community in a way that I've never seen.
I think the work is so important. I think you're really important, and your message. No, I really do. But I have to ask you just a fun question first. Is it fun to get launched I mean, I would think that would be, shaking. Is this thing going to make it to the, what is that?
It's super fun. I mean, it's really, and we do all this training for all of the things we either know or think could go wrong, right? I think by the time you strap into the rocket on the launch pad, you better have reconciled with what the risks are. Those aren't hidden to us along the way. We've seen our friends experience the worst of it along the way. And so that's there. But I think that's less there for you as the astronaut strapping in than it is for your family that's watching you do it. Much more difficult to be the person watching somebody you love strap in. But it's an amazing ride. And it's hard to describe it's when I think about it in my mind, it's like, okay, that's what 7 million pounds of exploding rocket stuff underneath you feels like. There's kind of this expectation that's going to feel, rumbly and like people are sitting on you and that that you're going someplace super fast.
And then also, just for me, if nobody else, being in the space station, and it's pretty big, right? It's like a football field long. Does that feel confining in any way, or do you feel like, does that feel uncomfortable, like you claustrophobic? You get any feeling like that?
The space station, for me at least, was not claustrophobic at all, and the space shuttle wasn't either. And I always ask people to think about, even here in this, this beautiful planetarium, it's like we're sitting on the floor. We're confined to this space on the floor, right? Up there, you just gently touch wherever you are and you're floating. You've got this whole volume so you could have 7 crew members up on what you would think of as a small flight deck of the space shuttle. Some are on the ceiling, some are on the walls, you can occupy that space differently. And the space station is ginormous. I mean, it is. You lay it on the ground, it's the size bigger than a football field. The interior volume, 6-bedroom house, and that's the volume of a 6-bedroom house, not just walking around. It's fantastic.
So here's where I want to kind of get into this beautiful work that you're doing and your perspective. Can you help? We got a lot of problems down here, right? When you're in the space station looking down at Earth, and you have this unique perspective. You have, I guess maybe I would want to start with, tell me about your Earthrise moment and what that means to you, and help us understand what an Earthrise moment is.
I think it's like an awakening, right? It's almost a reality check. Stuff that's around us all the time, and we're just not necessarily paying attention to it. And of course, that was presented to me very differently through the window of a spaceship. But I relate it to everything I do now, even if I'm in my own backyard. And I think it's just opening up your heart and mind to the awe and wonder that surrounds you, no matter where you are. And that's certainly, I mean, it's this gorgeous, colorful, like bright, glowing perspective of that, looking out the window of a spaceship at Earth. It's, I think the big thing to me was um, from the first look out the window to the last when I was in space was, wow, we live on a planet in space. And it's why I love this place we're in right now. It's this reminder of who and where we all are in space together. And that's a big deal. And so there's not a day that goes by now where I don't wake up, my feet hit the ground, and the one of, if not, oh, my dog needs to go out or whatever. I mean, there's those other things going on. But it's like, man, I am standing on a planet in space. And that's what we all have that in common, right? And that we're all Earthlings, only border that matters, that thin blue line of atmosphere, and how important it is,
Well, those are the three things that I remember that you've talked a lot about, was that we're all like, can you talk a little bit about this issue of thin blue line? What does that mean to you? We're all Earthlings, what does that mean to you? And we're on this planet. What are those three things? Because that's your, when I think about you, I think about those three things. So what does that really mean? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I think where it really, the way it became clear to me was when I was on a spaceship and I started thinking about, I was like, wow, everything that we do on this, use the space station, you could use the space shuttle if you wanted to, same idea. Is like, we're in this place that we had to build, like this machine that we had to build to mimic what Earth does for us naturally, right? Just so we can survive there. I mean, it's critical to us. And so every morning we float out of our crew compartment and we're like, okay, how much carbon dioxide's in our atmosphere? How much clean drinking water do we have? Integrity of that thin metal hull that's protecting us from the deadly vacuum of space, and the health and well-being of my 6 crewmates. And we have to do that every day and keep it in our minds just to survive in that place. And it just became, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect example, the perfect analog to what living on our planet should be. Our planet is our spaceship. That thin blue line, that's the thin metal hull. It's what protects us from the deadly vacuum of space. We should be paying attention to how much carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere, how much clean drinking water we have, and the health and well-being of all of our crewmates. And people will say to me, yeah, but that's 7 people, Nicole, on a spaceship. That's not 7 billion on a planet. I'm like, it is the exact same thing. Yeah. So it's just, that's why I really like to encourage people to, like, feet hit the floor in the morning. I am on a planet in space. Yeah. And it just puts you in your place, I think.
Yeah. How much trouble are we in our little space station?
I don't mean to laugh at that. I think I don't know. I mean, I don't know the numbers. I will not pretend to know the numbers. I know there's urgency to the kinds of things we need to do. I think a lot of people are just, and this is the crew not passengers thing. I think a lot of people, and maybe it's hope too, maybe they have hope that the people who run the countries and our governments are going to take care of this for us, right? And I think they should be working to take care of it. Don't get me wrong. But I think this accepting your role as a crewmate is where the hope really comes from, right? acknowledging what's going on around you in your own neighborhood, in the neighborhood of your planet, and even the simple things in your life that you can do to help positively influence change. And, where I see that happen the most, and I do have hope because I am very fortunate to get to work with people like at the lowest levels and some of the highest levels that are working really hard to make positive change. And that's happening all over the planet.
Do you want to share some things that inspire you or you think is working well?
I think there's a couple that come to mind. In the conclusion of my book, I wrote the story of a gentleman named Dr. David Vaughan, who is the founder of an organization called Plant a Million Corals. And he is the guy that came up with the like revolutionary way to, in an accelerated way, regrow our coral reefs. And he's teaching this to people all over the world. And so while you might not hear about Dave Vaughan, which you should, um, you'll hear about groups like Coral Vita, Coral Gardeners, Bonaire Reef Renewal, all these groups that are doing coral restoration around the world, they are using Dave's method to do it. And we are revitalizing reefs around the world, and we're learning how and where they should be in this changing climate that we have. That's huge.
Yeah.
Every second breath we take is from the ocean. And the way the ocean survives is through the coral reefs and the ecosystems of the ocean surviving. So to bring us that every second breath, I think that's a big deal. The one that really stands out to me too is energy. We are going to have to transition in big ways, from fossil fuels, and they're never going to go away, I don't think. And, it'll be future when that's not around anymore. But as we're doing that, we see a lot of solar, wind, that kind of thing going on right here on the planet. And that's fantastic, don't get me wrong. But I don't think we should be clearing off important land to put a solar farm. We should be looking at that a little bit differently in the way we do it. In fact, I'll just share one of my pet peeves with you. It's right here in Florida. And then I'll get to the space-based solar power. So you drive over to the Kennedy Space Center, which I encourage everyone to do. Go, Kennedy Space Center, then Disney World, right? Go see the really cool reality of things. But outside of the visitor complex, across the street, there's this massive solar farm, which I'm like, fantastic, they're doing the solar thing. It's acres of solar farm in kind of the marshland area. And I look to the right at the acres of uncovered parking lot. And I'm like, why build it in the marsh? Why not cover the parking lot? So those kinds of things disturb me. I don't want to diss the solar farm, but I want to say, gosh, there's so much opportunity for us to think better about that. The ultimate solar farm is in space. And it's to create space-based solar factories that beam the sun's energy back to Earth. And then it can be distributed through the same infrastructure we already have for getting our power places.
You beam it back, it's like a laser?
It can be laser, but I think, so laser or microwave, I think, are the two options, and they're working. They've got, there's a lot of work going on how you make that happen. There's a company in particular that I really love called Space Solar. They're over in the UK. And man, for the amount of money that we spend on a World Cup soccer tournament, we could deploy space-based solar power. And I'll just throw that number of $200 billion spent to do a one-time World Cup soccer tournament in Qatar a couple of years ago.
I think you spent money on worse things than that.
Yeah, and I got nothing against football tournaments. I got nothing against it. But how we, in our own minds, the collective minds, say $200 billion for a soccer tournament is okay, but a quarter of that to deploy space-based solar power is unthinkable. How can we spend that kind of money?
So you have hope.
I absolutely have hope, and it's why I like this kind of experience where we can really, and I think we have to keep the hope. And But beyond the hope, we've got to be part of the solution, right? And to
Yeah.
me, and it's a simple way of thinking about it. And the word has come up several times. Crew, team, however you want to look at it. It's like you can't just wait for somebody else to do things for you.
Yeah.
You've got to be engaged.
Yeah.
And that can be that can be in your own home. It could be in your local community, or if you have the opportunity, you do something global. And and we all have those things that we can be doing. It's to be a crewmate and not a passenger.
So I love this. This is another one of the, classic Nicole phrases. Tell me about this. What does it mean to be a crew member and not a passenger? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think being a crewmate it's all about kind of the care and feeding of what's going on around you, right? That whether that's your life support system, your planet or your spaceship, or the people and the other life you share that place with. And so it's being actively engaged in um, in keeping things going, if you will. I mean, that's what's happening every day on the space station or on the submarine you mentioned. I mean, and I think all of us, if we really paid attention to the reality of it all, we all need to be paying attention to what it is that allows us to survive in this place, and take part in that.
What about this issue of getting along? Like you're in, you're in a space station. You've got people from different countries, right? You call them your friends. I've used most of these people probably have been and maybe still are your friends. Is that true?
Absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely.
All right. So they're from different countries. Russia, Russia's considered our enemy sometimes and by other people. So there's always different. So can you go back to that microcosm? How do we get along?
I think where it starts is with a mission, like that everyone has agreed upon,
Yeah.
right? For the space station and what the work we're doing, human space flight, it's all this off the Earth for the Earth. We're going to space. We're going to be working together on things that help, help us explore further out in space, but are ultimately about improving life on Earth. Somewhere along, we decided that was going to be the mission, and everybody agreed. And so there's these rules of engagement that we had to come up with. And there's going to be times where somebody, a country, a partner, individual might not be happy with what's going on. And then everybody comes together and it's like, okay, we decided these are the rules for how we're going to deal with this kind of thing. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't get morphed along the way somehow from what we learn along the way, but everybody agreed to it. And it is a greater good mission that's going on with it, right? And so we have figured out, and it's why I think what we've done with the International Space Station program, it's like this perfect model for how we could do this on our planetary spaceship. And we have, at any given time, there are 7 people on the space station. They represent 15 different countries, 5 international space programs, of which there are countries that we are not all that happy with down here on Earth right now. And we are one crew on that station with one commander from one of those countries. And uh, and the way we figure, you're human beings.
Yeah.
There's always going to be things that irritate you about somebody else, or whatever it might be. But I think you look to the mission you've come together for. You've all trained together to deal with really critical things like a hole in your space station sucking all your air out. I mean, that's a big deal. And when you can rally at 3 o'clock in the morning, float out of your crew compartments and work together in a way to manage that situation, we can do it for anything. And it's the ways, it's not. I hate to oversimplify it, but it really seems simple to me. It's like, how do we figure out how to be good crewmates and not, um, in conflict about everything? And I think that comes down uh, to that simple reality check of living on a planet, right? We're on a planet. It's got a particular set of resources. It's got this thin blue line that protects us. We all share it, not just with other humans, but with the other creatures of the planet that allow us to survive here. And once and for all, come up with the rules of engagement.
Yeah. I, I remember you saying something about the planet's what? How many years? 6 billion years old, right?
Yeah.
And we've been here for 200,000 years, I believe. We think we have been, as far as we know, right?
Not even a line on the pie chart, right?
Yeah, not
Of
even
time.
Yeah. Yeah, and so can you talk a little bit about that? The idea that, you know, we may come and go, but the planet's going to be fine. I think that's what you said. But is there something around that you might want to share? Because it seems to me like the planet doesn't really care so much if we are going to be here or not.
And it's survived much worse than us, right? So, and I think it's kind of the center of the universe thing, right? Where we have to sometimes take ourselves out of being the center of the universe and realize that, I mean, I love it when I hear people that finally realize it's not about saving the planet, right? It's about saving us. But that requires us to understand what it is about this planet that allows us to survive. And I don't look at it from a purely selfish motivation, if you want, right? But there are key things: clean water, clean air, that thin blue line, you know, oceans that can generate every second breath, you know, all of those kinds of things that allow this planet to be our spaceship. And so at a minimum, and was it Office Space, whatever that show was, and if you're just going to do the minimum, you know, we need to figure out how to keep those systems running, just like we do on a space station. You know, there's one thing that we've said on the space, every crew I think says this, because, you know, you're floating around the dinner table at night together, you know, you're 6 or 7 people that, like you do anywhere when you're sitting around with your family or your friends, you're like solving the world's problems, you know, what would you do? And one of the things that always comes up is, man, if we could just get all of our leaders floating in front of that cupola window, you know, that Earth-facing window on the space station, with their little heads bouncing off each other, looking back at Earth, I think it would be a big deal.
What would they feel?
Well, I think they'd feel a connection that they don't necessarily seem to feel when they're down here feet on the planet.
What would that connection be?
And that you can be, you know, I mean, that was the thing. It's like, wow, I'm as far as I would still like to go to the moon, so I like to think I'd get further. But the farthest I've ever been from the surface of Earth, and I feel more connected to that place than I may have when I was feet on it. And it's just, it really is. I keep saying this reality check thing. It's like, wow, you know, that's everyone, everything that we know of that is alive, that is important to us. You know, Sagan said it best, but I mean, oh my gosh, on this planet. And it's pretty clear when you're looking at it from up there, it's like, you never seem to find the other side of it. Like, oh, that's on the other side of the planet, I don't need to worry about that. It's not, it's all this one place. And I don't know, I think that does something to you. I mean, I think it does open your heart and mind to who and where we all are in space together.
Yes, I agree. I have a thought. I have an idea. I would just get your reaction to it. I've been thinking about this, and we were talking about we're going to Mars, right? It's pretty far to go to Mars, but we're getting closer to being able to do it, right? How do you feel about that? Does that feel like is that exciting to you?
It is exciting to me. But you know, you said you were pretty far. We are. You know, the farthest we've been as humans, and we haven't gone back in over 50 years.
Yeah, right? We're about to.
To the moon. We are about to go back. I, you know, hold hope for that. So that's what, 250,000 miles away, the moon?
Yep.
Mars, and there's probably somebody in this room that could correct me if I'm wrong. Mars, at its closest orbit to us, is like 35 million miles away. And so we have to time it pretty, you know, perfectly to get aligned properly and, you know, be able to fly there. That's a 6 to 9 month journey to Mars. And people are always so worried about, oh, how are we going to survive on Mars or live in Mars, build into the, the planet, whatever. It's like, I'm more worried about the 6 to 9 month journey to Mars than I am about the living on the surface of Mars, because we can pre-deploy stuff to Mars. We can do all of that. We can build things there. There's a little bit of gravity, to support us doing that. But that 6 to 9 month journey to Mars, that's where we are going to have to really figure it out. Because that's not going to be, right? We've all seen the Martian movie where it was the ginormous spinning, has a gym and a kitchen and everybody has their own room. It's going to be probably the whole spaceship's going to be the size of what would have been the kitchen. So, now we have to think very differently about the human doing that, right? There's not going to be spinning to give you gravity. So, how are we going to exercise in a spaceship that's the size of this room? How are we going to eat? We're not getting resupply missions on our 6 to 9 month trip to Mars. So is it going to be a little pill? Is it going to be some sponge you add water to that gives you all the nutrients that you need to survive in that floaty environment where your bones are going away because you don't have the same kind of exercise protocols you could on a space station? I mean, all the human in the loop kind of thing gets us thinking even more about it.
Figure all this stuff out.
We can figure all of these things out.
Working together.
Yeah, we just have to decide to do it, right? But the focus always tends to be on the spaceship surviving to Mars and on once we get to Mars.
I have a thought. I don't know, just see what your reaction is to this. I'm not sure it's a good thought, but it's a recurring thought. It is that I wonder if we should make a rule on Earth saying that we're not allowed to leave until we figure out how to get along. It just seems to me like if we continue the way that we treat, the way that we've been treating each other, and continue and not learn how to be crew members, and we end up on Mars, we're just going to continue that we'll be the predators of the universe, right? Or maybe So, do you have any reaction to that at all? You don't need to, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I do because I think I really believe that I really believe everything we're doing in space, in one way or another, is ultimately about improving life on Earth. Whether it's the technology of the spaceship, or that food you have to eat. How do you get something totally nutritious for yourself out of a pill or out of a little sponge you add water to? I don't know if that's what it's going to be, but those kinds of leaps in tech or approaches that we've had to make to live in a small spaceship or to explore off our planet, I think are very beneficial to us down here on Earth. Not even mentioning the science that's going on up there every day. And one of the greatest gifts that the International Space Station has given us is that it's international, right? We're working with 15 different countries in one way or another every day on that spaceship through our control centers here on Earth. And the way that we've had to do that, those rules of engagement, whatever it is, has, I believe, helped improve the way we manage with each other down
We
here
have
on Earth.
examples of that too, right? We
Yeah.
have examples of how laws have changed and here too as a result of. I'm trying to think of the original examples, but there's things that have changed as a result of Earthrise.
Yeah, we got the Environmental Protection Agency out of
That would be an
out
example.
of that Apollo 8 mission, that first time, over 50 years ago now, when with human eyes, we saw Earth rising above the moon, another planetary body. And that was the reality check, like not just for people in the United States who were part of the NASA world, but for the whole world watching. And Earth Day came out of that. And Clean Air and Clean Water Acts as a result of this movement, this thought of who and where we are in space together.
So you kind of reversing my thought. So my thought was we shouldn't leave the planet until we figure out how to get along. I think what you've just said is by going into space, we can learn things to help to kind of reverse engineer what's happening on Earth. And then maybe by continuing our journey, we'll learn more. So you're more hopeful.
I absolutely agree. I agree with that and there's a really wonderful gentleman. His name is Frank White, who coined the term overview effect. And so that his whole philosophy is around what is this impact of seeing Earth from space, of experiencing our home planet from a distance. And he and I talk about it all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, yes, that is one of the greatest gifts that space exploration has given us, is this opportunity to look back at ourselves, right? And not just as human beings like doing it, but I think about, we're again in this planetarium and the exploration we're doing with robots even, or these robotic missions. When we look at pictures of Saturn, right? We're in awe. Oh my gosh, the iconic rings, this planet that we're learning more about, and all of it. And yet, the most impressive picture of Saturn that we get back from these missions is the one where you kind of see the planet and you've got the rings, and then there's this little dot of light underneath those rings that's us. And we're always trying to make that connection, right? We're like, whatever we want to learn and discover about Saturn, we're trying to relate it back to ourselves. And what can that do for us? What can we learn from it? All of it. And I think everything about the way we have to figure out, solve the problems to explore space, help us work better together here on Earth.
That's a new perspective for me. So you're an astronaut, right? You're an aquanaut, you're an author, and you're an artist, which I want to talk about in a minute. And I was going to say awesome at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the bonus. But so do you want to talk a little bit about the art and your connection to art?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I talked earlier about my dad and flying, which I think is a very creative thing if you're going to build your own airplane and have to think about moving in 3 dimensions and all that. My mom, growing up, she shared what she loved too. And, back in our day, it was, macrame, hooked rugs, pottery kind of thing. But it really, I think from the very, very early on got me thinking creatively too, and never questioning whether you could enjoy science and art. And it makes me sad. I think a lot in our schools over the last however many years, we've had this push to STEM, which I don't have a problem with STEM, but it's like our kids need to be using their whole brains, right? So we need to be bringing all of their talents to bear. If they love music, if they love painting, if they love writing poetry or, building things, we need that part of them as well. And um, for me, it just was together all the time. And I was very fortunate to get to paint in space. Did this watercolor painting in space, and
You talked about how complicated.
oh my gosh,
It's not
it's so
so
much
easy, right?
fun.
Yeah.
But I wish I would have activated my brain cell and actually videotaped the experience. I have one picture of painting in space that my crewmate Bob very gratefully that he took that. But I wish I had videotaped it because I think it would have been a really cool way just to describe what it's like to live in a floaty environment where everything's different. It's not necessarily more difficult, it's just different. And so you have to think about how that's gonna, so floaty balls of water instead of cups of water, and what would happen if you touched your brush to the paper. It was a really like a personal highlight of the mission for me. But that opportunity to paint in space, to bring all of it together in that really technical, if you want to think about it, place that I was in, that really inspired me when I was thinking about what I would do when I retired from NASA. And that was a difficult decision to make, to take myself out of, being in line to fly in space again. But I was at a point where I was feeling I needed to do something different. And art just seemed like the way to reach people that might not even know there is a space station, right?
Talk about, and you not only art but art for children, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so what do we got here?
But it was just such a cool evolution, I retired from NASA. I was using my own artwork to share this experience of flying in space in whatever way I could. I don't care if you like my art or not, but I can share the backstory of, what inspired this painting, what work we're doing in this place, the partnerships that we have. And that led me to this opportunity to work with kids in hospitals. And from the very first one of those sessions, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I just found my next mission in life, which is to, use the inspiration of space and the creativity of art, pull that together um, to help kids that are going through stuff that, you wish no kid ever had to go through.
Really tough.
Yeah. And I don't know. We ultimately formed this organization called Space for Art Foundation, where it's a long one. We are uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. It's like space-themed art therapy programs, and it's grown. We've worked with kids in every country on the planet. These beautiful art spacesuits that it's individual pieces of kids' art quilted together by the same company who made my spacesuit that I got to do a spacewalk in, the suits that walked on the moon, those guys, ILC Dover. Here, I'm just gonna give them a shout out. Right here, ILC Dover, the spacesuit company that have volunteered with us since the beginning to quilt these kids' artwork together into these art spacesuits.
Is that what you're doing these days? Is that what are you doing?
It is. It's like it's a focus for me. I mean, if I could do nothing else, I would do this. I complain. I'm going to use this guy. My disappointment is that I still have to earn a living. So I, I do speak and other things that allow me to earn an income, which I love as well, because we're talking about these same kinds of things in those environments too. And so it's good. But the space and the art and the creativity, which I think can come together in so many different ways. It can come together through the Space for Art Foundation, purposefully working with kids to create something that they are part of something bigger and are inspired by. Working with organizations like Space for a Better World, where we are, the motto is connecting the space curious to the space serious, making people aware of things like space-based solar power or these coral restoration activities, how space is positively influencing and allowing those things to happen and make life better for us. Um, and if I can work with kids, I love working with kids, but adults are just big kids. And, I think I've grown to know that if we just treat each other like that, not disrespectfully in any way, but just trying to get to, what is the heart of the people that you're working with? What is the spirit of it? How do we open hearts and minds to awe and wonder? And, in whatever industry you're in, I think that's really important to get to the purpose of it.
What you just said to me is foundational for what I feel like you've been doing and you've been talking about. Just the, if we recognize ourselves as connected, right? And that we treat each other with respect and see those differences, including, yeah, right, the trust. We can solve whatever problems we have, And I think we're not, and that's why I love talking with you, just to get your perspective. So one of the things, last thing I wanted to say here, well, almost last thing, was the. Can you just mention a little bit about how fun plays into your life? Because I've seen, yeah. Can you, yeah, talk
It's
about that?
embedded in everything. And I think it just kind of comes naturally from the work that we're doing, whether it's creating individual pieces of art with kids, whether it's, I mean, we do these ginormous art creations made out of palm fronds and coconuts with kids in the Maldives, who you'd be surprised who hears about space, and I mean, that are inspired by it. And but I think you have to have fun. I mean, that clown nose picture, to me, the first thing you think about is like, oh my gosh, it must be fun to be in space.
Space is serious
It
business.
is,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, it is serious business. So what I share and what I shared with your group with that picture is, yeah, it was fun. These are people I enjoyed hanging out with and floating around a space station with and doing science with and all of this work. There was personality in it all, right? Which made it fun. But I also could look into the eyes of every single one of those people and know that when things didn't go as planned, when it was hitting the fan, I trusted that every single one of those people was going to have my back. And I know that they trusted I would have theirs. And that's key to being a good crewmate.
If everybody on Earth felt like other people had their back, what would we would have that solar system right now, that solar energy up. We would, we would. And anyway, all right. Well, so I so admire you, and specifically, I mean, you had such an amazing life, the courage to pursue your passion. It's a model, really, and not to overstate it, I'm not putting you up on a pedestal or making you a hero, but I really admire the message. The message is powerful and important. I'm so grateful for you to spend time with me, today. So I really, really appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah,
And I think it speaks to purpose, right? Finding your purpose, um, being a crewmate. I mean, that if I mean, and kids get it. That's what I love. I love working with kids. You start talking about, and then you hear them telling their parents, "Did you know we live on a planet? We learned that in kindergarten." But I mean, it is the simple stuff that really unites us, I think. And I'm grateful to you for talking to me, and I'm grateful to you for reading the book and for really absolutely understanding the message of it all. And I mean, I saw that when I came to speak to your group too. You don't have to invite Nicole Stott to come in and talk to your group. You can do other things.
So I wanted to
Yeah.
recognize your book, right? Which I thought was a great book. Yeah, it's a great book. It's wonderful, and it's really so much of what you've shared is right in here. So please look at that. And I want to float an idea with you, see if you think I'd like to borrow your idea of the crew. I love this idea of the crew because if people understood that we live in this environment where the carbon in the water is important and how we get along is important and we can solve our problems together.
Seems so simple, doesn't
Seems
it?
so simple. If we could just take that microcosm and expand it, it would be awesome. So, for the people that kind of get that message, want to learn more about it, want to contribute to it, I want to put something. I want to put "Do You Have a Light," which is DYHAL dial, which is the name of this podcast /crew, and let people sign up and add their email and begin to work together and to connect to some of the resources. We're going to put some of the resources you mentioned there and get involved, not just hear this, but actually do something. So what do you think about that?
I love it. In fact, I applaud you because it actually is something I was hopeful to be able to do, and we have it in little scattered places. But I love it because I think it allows people um, to not just come and like raise their awareness of what's out there, but to share what they're doing as crewmates as well. Like to add to that list of what's going on. And I mean, we could sit here all day, I think, and list out the amazing work that's being done by, folks like you, people you're engaged with in the local community that are doing really impressive work that we all could be part of if we wanted to.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yes.